this is Richard Rainey with NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. I'm here with Representative Garret Graves. We're here covering the developments in Representative Steve Scalise's case and condition. And he's here. Thank you for spending some time with us to share any news, any updates you can with us. I guess the best place to start is, have you had a chance to see Mr. Scalise? Do you know, can you give us sort of an update on where things stand?
Sure. I spent a good bit of time at the hospital yesterday. Congressman Cedric Richmond and I were there in the morning, and then had a few other members that joined for some of the afternoon. He was in surgery when I was there, and ended up coming out heavily sedated. Look, anytime someone gets shot, it's serious. And so certainly, there are challenges associated with the case. But the thing about Steve, look, Steve's a fighter. He's strong, and he's in the best trauma hospital he could possibly be in. And so, I'm optimistic that he's going to come out and fully recover. That being said, we all need to be praying for him, and praying for him and for Jennifer and his girls, and for all the staff. Because certainly this is, challenging times for everybody right now. And in fact, the whole Capitol Hill community, the Louisiana delegation specifically, is pretty shook up right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you were here on the Hill in 2011 when Gabrielle Giffords, the last time something like this happened.
Actually, I wasn't. No, I was home. I was working on coastal issues.
Well, in any case, would you be able to sort of describe what the mood is here on the Hill? How are people taking it? How are your colleagues looking at this? I mean, because this shows, despite all the security and everything and the precautions that are taken, there is a vulnerability in public service.
There is, and I'll say the first response that folks had after we were informed about this yesterday morning, there were a big group of us that were together, was really just a very somber tone. I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. And there were, 24 of us standing around. And we all migrated to our phones and TV together, standing there watching or reading our phones and sharing information we had with one another. Then a little while later, it did break on the news, and so we started watching TV and seeing what was being said there. But, again, just somber tone and very sobering. And that it's a reminder, whenever you're in a very fast-paced world that your life could be scheduled in 10-minute blocks, literally all day long and night, just realizing how quickly things can change. And so, that was probably the second feeling. And I remember my wife FaceTimed me with our young girls maybe 30, 45 minutes after we learned of the news. And, looking at our girls who, it makes it very real. And then the last feeling that I had was one of somewhat frustration, in that the tone of politics in this country has been on a real downward slide. And I was just talking 2 days ago, so the day before the shooting, with a friend of mine who is I think he would appreciate me calling him a flaming liberal from California. He and I are very close, but look, he represents a very liberal district. We represent a conservative district. We respect one another and understand that. But we were just talking about the tone and the rhetoric in politics, on the Hill, in the media, in the blogosphere. You have a lot of people that really lob these verbal grenades, and words mean something. Words have consequences. And while you and I may take that and may not cause us to have blood pressure shoot up and our heartbeat race, some people it really does. And we've got to understand that our job here, if people on the outside want to act that way, they can do it. First Amendment, they can do it. But people here need to first embrace the fact that we're Americans. That is the deepest bond that we have. We are Americans first. Sure, we can represent a certain ideology or a party, but that bond of being Americans should be stronger than anything else. And we have an obligation to the people we're representing to find common ground and to solve problems and to move this country forward.
Do you think that can happen? Do you think this could be a catalyst for some kind of change, either legislatively, and what I'm talking, obviously about the conversations that are starting up around Second Amendment rights, gun control, security issues, privacy. What do you see any of that? I mean, it's very early, but
yeah. Look, number one, what we saw happen yesterday can be compared to what happened in Baton Rouge last summer. We had the Alton Sterling shooting, which evoked very strong emotions. Protests, which were largely ignited by folks who came in from out of town. There were peaceful protests prior to that, largely. They ended up, causing these strong emotions to come to the surface. We saw how that manifests in the awful shootings of our law enforcement officers in the Baton Rouge area. And immediately after that, it was amazing seeing people come together and just our community coming together. And it didn't matter socioeconomic, it didn't matter ethnicity, it didn't matter anything. Everybody came together. And it was amazing to see. But my opinion, I believe I've seen that dissipate. I've seen that drop off to some degree. We can't allow that to happen. If you talk about changes, can this be a catalyst for change? Can we take the lessons learned here and do something? Yes. And I'll tell you personally, and this is something we've been talking about since well before this shooting, I think that there could be some organizational and structural changes to Congress that could be helpful. I personally, and I've said this publicly well before the shooting, I think that the parties have too much power and control. I think that the party labels are often what is viewed as being up front, being on people's chest, as opposed to the people you're supposed to be representing, as opposed to the nation, and I think that's problematic. So I think one of the things that we could be doing is looking at some of these structural changes to Congress to help improve bipartisanship, to help improve relationships working together. And I'll tell you, we've tried really hard to do it. Far from perfect. Virtually every bill we've introduced, we've had a bipartisan co-sponsor on it. We haven't walked away from our conservative ideology and the constituents we're supporting, but also understand that if we're going to be successful, we've got to work together. And I'll tell you, I'd put our legislative successes up against just about anyone.
But I mean, that's going to be a tough hill to climb. I mean, considering, a good example would be the nomination and appointment of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. The fact that the filibuster was done away with, and his appointment was done on very strictly partisan lines. Mm-hmm. And so there's almost that tendency you see out in public happening in Congress where there's this separation by the power. So how do you, I know you
absolutely.
So when you say structural, how do you reverse that?
Slowest confirmation for a cabinet, I think, since George Washington.
Exactly.
More no votes against presidential nominations than President Obama, Bush, and Clinton combined. I mean, look, is Congress playing a true leadership role? No, absolutely not. I think Congress is setting an awful tone here, and it bothers me when and I want to say it again because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I am less than perfect, but we have been striving to turn those tides. But the rhetoric up here is needs to be toned down. People need to be working together. And I'll say it one more time. We were sent here. Our jobs are to get things done. Standing up and being an obstacle to progress and impediment to legislation, that's easy. Anybody can do that. Anybody can vote no. Anybody can step in and throw martyrs or throw rocks at legislative ideas. Diplomacy actually takes skill, figuring out where is the common ground. How can we move this ball forward 5 yards on this play and come back and try and advance it another 2 yards on the next play and keep moving forward on some of the objectives we have. That's what takes real skill. And unfortunately, you have not seen a ton of it here.
Right. Do you see any kind of specific legislation or specific topics coming out of this? And I'm referring to, I know like Representative Clay Higgins came out and afterwards and talked about how they should lessen restrictions on gun rights so that people would possibly be armed if the Capitol Police hadn't been there protecting there for Mr. Scalise's detail, there may not have been an armed officer on site. Do you see that any talk or conversations like that starting up?
Look, is it possible for us to use this as the impetus to grab some legislative ideas where we have common ground and move forward? Absolutely. It can be done. It's going to take some leadership. It can be done. Would I suggest that we pick up Second Amendment as the place to start? Absolutely not. I mean, look, the Second Amendment is one of those very contentious issues, and there are very good arguments to be made for some of the under the right conditions for using the Second Amendment to improve security. But that is a very contentious, polarizing issue here. Could we grab or get our arms around security issues? Yes, I think there are other security issues we could all join hands and work together on. Could we work together on tax reform? Yes, I think folks on both sides are frustrated by the size and complexity of our tax code, the unfairness of our tax code. Could we pick up infrastructure? Sure. There's something else where we can be working together to deliver an infrastructure package, whether in the case of Louisiana restoring the coast or addressing congestion and traffic issues. There are a number of areas where I think we have common ground. It would be good for us to start and build a foundation on those and then begin moving forward, perhaps on some of the more contentious issues. And as crazy as it sounds, I think that could include healthcare. If folks are willing to let the temperature settle a bit, to take a step back, to take a deep breath, and recognize, whether you love the Affordable Care Act or you hate it, right now it's financially unsustainable. So it doesn't matter if you love it or you hate it. Things need to be changed. And so I even think, as audacious as that sounds, I think that if folks are willing to set party aside and think about what is truly best for the American people, we could actually come to consensus on some ideas there.
How has, sort of shifting gears here, how has what happened yesterday affected you and affected how you go about your business and things that you think about that you didn't on Tuesday?
Yeah, I used the term sobering before, and I talked about, when my wife and daughters FaceTimed me, look, it makes you want to pick them up and hug them. And as a matter of fact, they are making an unplanned trip up here today because we wanted to see each other. And so, it reminds you of those things that are really important. It reminds you of, I think helps to perhaps reevaluate your priorities. And what it's caused me to do in addition to that is doubling or redoubling our efforts to think about our choice of words very carefully and redoubling our efforts to make sure that we're working together with other people. And while we may not agree with the ideas or solutions that some liberal folks may have, respecting the fact that they were elected by roughly 750,000 people, that they're representing part of America, and we should celebrate our diversity. But that while we may disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable. That as I have mentioned, that the bond we share as Americans is greater than anything we may part on.
Well, I wish it was under better circumstances, but thank you, Representative Graves, for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.